It's 4:20 somewhere, and right now that somewhere is right here. So hello and welcome to the Cannabis Show. I'm producer Vince, and here's your host, Ricardo Baca.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you. Oh, and thanks to everyone joining us today, and welcome to the Cannabist Show. Because you are right here where we talk about all things weed.
All things.
And that is the serious marijuana news and the not so serious reviews and videos and everything else. So, in fact, if you pop onto the site right now, that's thecannabist.co. You will see stories about the madmen and women branding the legal pot industry.
The Dawn Vapors.
About Massachusetts state senators heading to Colorado to see cannabis business in action.
Formerly an oxymoron.
And about the woman who throws the swankiest and most luxe cannabis parties in America.
The ones I don't get invited to.
Well, we're going to change that, Vince, at this next party. But of course, producer Vince in the studio with me. Dude, how have you been?
You know, I have been absolutely wonderful, Ricardo. Thank you for asking. Playoffs in the NFL are in full swing, and me being me, that's taken over most of my life. The Broncos are going up against the Steelers. My Steelers this weekend. I don't know which side I'm cheering for yet. Luckily, this weekend helped me. How have you been, Ricardo?
I've been great, man. You know, I had a blast with you and producer Dane on Saturday. We might have mentioned this in last week's show, but we went group cannabis outing to Puff, Pass, and Paint, which is like a canvas and cocktails, but think cannabis and cocktails. And it was hilarious. And, you know, Vince will throw up a photo from our little session. And yeah, if you're wondering what that is on my canvas, welcome to the club, because I have no idea. I was going for my dog, and then it kind of ended up looking like this devil horse nicknamed Blucifer that hangs out at Denver International Airport. Yeah, it was kind of mania. But did you have fun, Vince?
I had a great time. I called the experience cathartic at the end of it. I felt relaxed. I felt wonderful. I paint pretty regularly. I think I was one of the only people on the crew there who is a painter naturally. So I had I was a little bit more relaxed than everybody else. But the mission I have for our viewers and listeners, go ahead and go online somewhere. I'll probably tweet Ricardo's painting. Send us your best suggestions for the naming of it, because I got to know what we're going to call it.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine. Well, it is that time, Vince. Are you ready for the week in weed?
I am pumped and ready for the week in weed.
All right. That's my kind of enthusiasm. So, starting this week in weed in Texas and Florida, where two universities examined federal data for a paper they recently published in the Journal of School Health. The title of the paper got many cannabis activists excited. It's called Prioritizing Alcohol Prevention, Establishing Alcohol as the Gateway Drug, and Linking Age of First Drink with Illicit Drug Use.
Wow, dude. I mean, the title pretty much says it all, right? But Ricardo, what exactly did these researchers from Texas A&M and the University of Florida find?
So, you know, what they found was that, quote, the vast majority of respondents reported using alcohol prior to either tobacco or marijuana initiation, end quote. That means not only that of the three main substances, alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana, kids were the least likely to start using pot before the others. Vince, you mind pulling up that Washington Post graphic?
You got it, man. Here it is.
So as the researchers wrote, quote, alcohol was the most widely used substance among respondents, initiated earliest, and also the first substance most commonly used in the progression of substance use.
In the progression of substance use. This made me immediately try to remember back to my childhood when I started to dabble with tobacco and alcohol and cannabis. And I don't know which one came first, alcohol or tobacco, but they were very near one another. So maybe, I mean, from my personal, I agree. I agree with the
findings. It's interesting. It has us thinking back, you know. I certainly had a drink before I tried anything else. Just an interesting way of looking at the data and really reevaluating this concept of a gateway drug and what that means in 2016. So elsewhere in the week in weed, Vince, we lost a rock star this week, and he was a friend and an alien. When the legendary David Bowie died after a very quiet 18-month battle with cancer. You know, I used to be a music critic, and this hit me hard. I was up pretty late on Sunday, and I happened upon the New York Times story on Twitter, and it just kind of broke me. Like so many of us, this had more of an impact on me than a lot of the you know, rock legends that we've lost. You know, but Bowie's death did inspire me to write this week about his 1976 weed arrest in upstate New York, because that arrest ultimately ended up in this very handsome mugshot right here.
Yep, that one right there. He's a good-looking dude. I mean, but what your piece, it was awesome, Ricardo, and I really appreciated about it as I went through social media and everything that I could find about Bowie I was reading was you found a new angle to really memorialize him from. And while it wasn't the highlight of his life, it was still a really cool moment, and I really liked finding, you know, something new about Bowie.
Yeah, thanks.
But, you know, you're welcome, dude. I really loved this old news clip that you posted, so much so that I'm going to take a couple more minutes of our time here and go ahead and play it.
In a report handed up late this afternoon at the Hall of Justice, a county grand jury failed to indict popular British rock star David Bowie of felony drug charges. Bowie and 3 associates were arrested at their Rochester hotel room earlier this month. Undercover police officers had claimed they'd found a quantity of marijuana in their rooms. Bowie still faces possible misdemeanor charges in connection with the case, but his attorneys say they will seek to have those misdemeanor charges dropped.
So, as you heard there, Bowie was arrested at a Rochester hotel with some friends after playing a show there. But what we uncovered, thanks to the awesome work of the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle in upstate New York, is that a young James Osterberg Jr., a.k.a. Iggy Pop, was also arrested on pot charges that night, and that suspected prostitutes who were awaiting their own arraignment also gave Bowie a particularly loud greeting, and that Bowie's preliminary hearing was ultimately scheduled for April 20th, aka 420.
You know, Ricardo, only Ziggy Stardust could choreograph a mid-70s marijuana arrest with so much style. It was beautifully done.
You know, he was one of my favorites, and he will be missed. We're going to wrap up this Week in Weed with some wacky news out of Colorado, where a canine unit intercepted 2 large shipments of cannabis that authorities say was headed for distribution out of state. All in all, 50 pounds of weed was sniffed out by this drug-sniffing dog employed by the Douglas County Sheriff's Office.
And this was interesting because the 2 shipments were found within a couple of weeks of each other, not a couple of cars of each other.
I know, bizarre, right? Vince, I'm going to be honest, I mainly included this in the segment so we could show this photo right here. And if you're listening to the podcast, here's a quick workaround. Go to thecannabist.co, search K9, K-9, and you will see what we're looking at right now, because those of us watching the show are looking at Atlas. And he is a gorgeous dog belonging to the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, laying on a 30-pound bag of cannabis. You know, this dog just cracks me up. He looks so dang happy. Biggest smile on his face, and he's wearing his sheriff's harness. Just cracks me up.
Absolutely. Atlas is one proud pooch. I mean, checking this guy out, he's got this huge smile face to face because he knows that he just did this job to the best of his ability. But I gotta say, if I was laying on 30 pounds of cannabis, I'd probably have that shit-eating grin on too, dude.
Vince, I imagine it's only a matter of time before we have that picture of you and that grin laying on top of 30 pounds of weed. So my first guest this week is making his first appearance on the show. As the president of 36 Solutions, he is one of the most visible and active pot lobbyists in Colorado. And I'm psyched to welcome Shawn Coleman to the Cannabis Show. How's it going, man?
Hey, Ricardo, good to see you.
Hey, good to see you too.
Yeah.
Happy New Year to you. Everything going well?
Things are going good.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Fresh back from Vermont?
Yeah, I spent the holidays in Vermont with some really good friends. I teach at a music camp.
Yeah, of course.
In the summer there, called Cannabis Music School. My background is in classical music. I was actually a Juilliard-trained clarinetist. And I teach there in the summer, and then some friends of mine that are on the faculty, we get together for the New Year's Eve, and we rent a place and we just spend New Year's there. It's a great way to spend some time, and actually it's a good revenue for this nonprofit music school too. So it kind of works out for everybody.
Dude.
Yeah.
Weed lobbyist and Juilliard trained clarinetist.
Renaissance man.
Renaissance man. Okay, so Shawn, tell me this: indica or sativa?
You want to know what I keep in my grasshopper?
Yeah, sure. Let's hear it.
Do you remember we were at that fancy party because that you were just talking about in the intro?
The Mason Jar events.
Yeah, with headquarters, one of my clients in Boulder. They're open to 10 now because Boulder changed that rule.
Of course.
But sativa is, as you can tell by me talking so fast, is clearly the answer to that question.
I was always fairly certain you were a sativa man.
I do like indicas. I like indicas with flavor, but in terms of my daily driver, I like a sativa. I like to keep in the game.
Cool, Shawn. As I mentioned earlier when I introduced you, you're a marijuana lobbyist, but before this post, you worked for U.S. Congressman Jared Polis, and Congressman Polis is one of the loudest drug reform voices in the House. So I wanted to, I'm curious if your experience in Polis's office helped to shape your vision, your take on modern pot policy at all.
Well, first I want to say that Congressman is not just a leader on marijuana reform; he's a leader on reform in general. If you look at his record in the U.S. House, he has really been about taking an approach to government that's about reform in general. How do we get our country back on track so that we're really dealing with democracy, so that the will of the people is actually what happens. So I just want to give my former boss and current friend that credit.
Sure.
But with respect to how that shaped my involvement in cannabis policy, as you said, he is the leader on the issue in the U.S. House. When I was in his office, we actually worked on the first marijuana business banking bill. It was H.R. 1986 in the 112th Congress, excuse me, if you wanted to go back and do that research. And so in terms of how that shaped my job now, number one is that being on the inside, being a legislative staffer, I was lobbied. So I got to see how good lobbyists do it. And
that's an interesting take.
Right.
You were lobbied, and now you know how to lobby.
Well, so one of my role models, David Springer, what he really did when I was working for the congressman is he treated the congressman and me and our office like a client. He would even say things, hey, look, you're not going to be with us on this bill or this amendment, whatever it is, because I know I've done research on your boss and his politics. I've done research on his constituents and that district. But next time. And so I've kind of adopted that same sort of theory in terms of my practice, which is that my most important clients are the 100 members under the dome.
Sure. Okay.
Because if I don't have credibility with them, then it doesn't really matter.
Right. Who your paying clients are.
Doesn't matter.
These unpaid clients.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. Well, tell me this, and I mentioned to you before the show, our readers, our viewers are so interested in this field of cannabis lobbyists. I mean, we get lots of questions about it. Our Ask the Cannabist columnist, Susan Squibb, you know her. She was talking about how that's one of the most common questions she got. Previous lobbyists have been on the show. I want you to finish this sentence for me. I love my job as a cannabis lobbyist because...
I can direct to a TV show to explain it.
All right.
House of Cards. Finally, there's a way, like, say, what do you do for a living? Instead of me trying to explain it in this awkward way that, just watch the show. But, I mean, so I'll say for one that yes, the answer to the question is that now there's a TV show that can just explain what I do for a living.
A very cutthroat TV show.
It's dramatized, but there are some things about it that are worthwhile. But, I mean, I guess what I would say for someone who really doesn't understand what someone like me does, think about it this way. If you're in a situation where you have a problem with the current law, you call a lawyer, and a lawyer tries to, you go to court, and that's a proper venue to have that grievance addressed in our political system, in our legal system. A lobbyist is for when the law, the current law, for whatever reason, is just simply not going to work for you. It's got to be something different than that. And maybe because you're looking for an opportunity that's something you'd be able to improve society and make things better, or maybe because the current law is something that is so egregious to you that it's causing you some kind of harm, and that the government is not intending to cause you that harm, but they don't know that they are. And so that's when a lobbyist comes into play. We go to the state capitol, the city council, the Congress, and say, here's the impact of the current law. Here's why it ought to be different than that. Whether it be something as simple as a tax policy, which is a terrible thing to say, it's very complex even that, or as something as complex as changing cannabis law, right? It's all of those things, because the reality is law is what you make it. And whether folks, I think that there is some sort of, idea that lobbyists are a bad part of a system because it's, well, I am paying for someone to tell these lawmakers what they should do. These lawmakers have their own mind.
Sure.
You know, the lawmakers that support cannabis in the Colorado legislature, they do so because it's a constituent issue for them. They know cannabis consumers. They know patients. They see the revenue in the communities. They see these business owners. And so they actually want to support. It's not because someone's paying them. I mean, because when you do it to its logical conclusion, it's so illogical. The campaign contribution limit for Colorado is $400. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're a lawmaker, you make $30,000 a year. So you have to be either independently wealthy or have some other job where this nominal amount isn't changing your mind. What changes a lawmaker's mind is knowing that this is how this affects their community, how it affects their constituents. Anecdotes. And the thing is that if you're running a business, you don't have time to go to the Capitol and make that case because you're busy running your business. So what someone like me does is we take that message, whether, you know, where I'm representing, you know, brands like Terrapin Care Station and the Farm and headquarters like that, where these business issues, or if, you know, also I represent the Drug Policy Alliance. So we're talking about issues, patients' rights and anti-discrimination, all those issues. So one person, I'm carrying the water of corporations and nonprofits and advocates all at the same time. That's the gig. That's
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating job that you do, and I appreciate you kind of spelling it out for us. One of my last questions for you is about this Colorado model that we talk about so much. You know, so much of the local industry here in Colorado thinks that we got it right when we regulated this first of its kind regulatory system for cannabis. And my question for you is the Colorado model all that great, or, you know, have other states started to show us how it can be done in certain capacities, perhaps in a better way?
Well, you know, from the perspective of we were doing it first, I think we did it as best as available to be done, because what we have to remember is that even Amendment 20, with its very strong majority vote, there is still that 45-50% of the population, well, 45-49% of the population, that didn't support this. And they also elect members to the General Assembly. And they also deserve representation, right? So what happens is that when it comes to the legislature, it's got to be some level of compromise. So what we got right was that we let this move forward, particularly with the medical marijuana program and making it for-profit and commercial. That was what we did right. When you look at other states, when you see the level of federal intervention, that's because it's not centralized. When you see the level of being unprepared for the recreational market, it's because the medical market wasn't firmly established. So that's what we did right. What we did wrong was somewhat conditioned on that we were first, and the
Sure, this had never been done before in the modern world. It's worth saying.
Sure, and the position of a lawmaker is they want to make the safest position, and the safest position is the closest thing to nothing, right? So it's very easy to say, well, we're in an environment where, you know, the sale of marijuana is still a crime, so let's just exclude all those people who have that criminal background from this
to work in the industry.
However, I would challenge, as a, you know, for the viewers and listeners, as an intellectual thought exercise, what would the world look like if we had actually done 40 acres and a mule? Translating that to cannabis policy, what would happen if we said that in order to profit from the peace, you have to demonstrate that you were harmed by the war?
Sure.
It would look very different. I'm not saying that's a practical thing to have done. I'm not saying anyone was trying to do that. What I am suggesting is that when you want to say where we didn't get it right, is that we continue to treat cannabis like plutonium.
Sure. When
it's cannabis. The crime associated with cannabis, the violence associated with cannabis, that all comes from the same source of any other crime or violence, which is scarcity. Some people can have it, some people cannot. And in some ways, you could almost say a medical marijuana program is worse, because you go from nobody can have it to only this very small class of people over here can have it. So there now we know where to target the crime and the violence, right? And then from there we move to this expansion. Now everybody can have it. But now that everybody can have it, if you're growing it in Pueblo County, you know, granted, these places are very secured as required by the statute, but also there isn't a whole lot of interest in the burglarization of these, because it's a plant that, when it's on the vine, is not particularly valuable to you unless you know what to do with it.
once it's a 6-7 foot tall plant, it becomes pretty valuable.
Right, which is why they have all the security, which is required by the statute. So the point being that the idea that you have to say that if someone had, if someone was, got caught selling a little weed in college, that you're going to prohibit them from having a license in the industry forever, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And to say that you're going to prevent them from having a license until 2018, well, sure, that sounds like you're being forgiving later, but 2018 is too late because the ship's already sailed.
Right. Okay. Well, Shawn, we're going to talk with you some more. Thank you for
Absolutely.
coming on the couch with us today. We appreciate it. Now, before we introduce our next guest, I'm going to throw to our very own Doctor of Dank, Professor Pat, for this week's entry in the new Cannabist lexicon.
Clone, a clipping from a cannabis plant, which can then be rooted and grown. Like many plants, cannabis can be asexually propagated via cloning, which creates an exact genetic copy of the mother plant. Most cannabis strains are really nothing more than a chosen clone which has been passed around. For example, I forgot to take a clone off that Skywalker OG before I flowered it, and now I'm kicking myself.
Thank you for that, Pat. Professor Pat, everyone. Now, on to our next guest, who wears many hats in the local cannabis community. But when I asked him if he had a specific title he preferred, he simply said, I guess I'm a power volunteer. So, it's my pleasure to welcome legalization activist Jordan Dietrich to the Cannabis Show. Hey,
wow,
man.
Ricardo, the Cannabist, I can't believe it.
You
chose me. Wow.
Oh, dude, I'm thrilled
what an honor.
you're here. No,
I just met Molly.
You met Molly Hughes?
Yeah.
Denver Post TV
Wow.
anchor, former Denver Network news anchor. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. We should have her on the show sometime, Vince.
I don't know why we haven't. She's our director.
I know. All right, Jordan, first question, indica or sativa?
Kind of a sativa guy. I mean, I like getting that kind of insightful, spiritual sort of level of things.
I like that. You're evening out the couch because we have clearly a sativa fan over here, and now you're the indica. You're evening us out.
Sativa.
Oh, you said
Yeah,
sativa?
sativa,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Clearly.
I like sativa, yeah. I mean, it depends on what is going on. There are certainly things that indica is great for.
Yeah, that's true.
But I tend to sort of really relax with that. And so I don't, that's like an end of day thing.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I'm not a big indica fan. It's weird. 3 people on the stage right now, 3 indica fans, although I think that's probably fairly common. But Jordan, you were an early supporter of the SAFER campaign in 2005.
Right.
You were a community outreach coordinator for the Amendment 64 campaign, yet you don't work in the industry at all. You're a power volunteer. Tell us what it means to be a power volunteer.
Well, I guess I wonder that too. Like that's why I came up with that term, because it's like,
yeah.
Well, I get involved in things because I volunteer for them. So I call people up or email them and say, hey, how can I help you? And I end up getting involved in these really great things.
You're a dream employee for so many of these organizations that are short-staffed and underfunded.
I think that's true, yeah. And then they invite me to all the parties, and and I'm like someone a lot of people know, and it's just because I volunteered a lot.
That's cool. And so this is clearly, something that you're passionate about. And for that reason, and for the reason that you're so closely involved with this industry, and you don't have a horse in the race, that's always important too. How do you think these legal sales in Colorado have gone? In other words, how would you grade the state and the city governments, the industry, the consumers? Now that we have more than 2 years of sales under our belt, what is that grade you would give?
Like A to F.
A through F, yeah, sure. Let's go the classical American educational grade system.
Well, should I explain, or should I just?
Yeah,
okay.
However you want.
I think that the consumers have been extremely supportive. On the first day of recreational sales, I was at the grand opening of one of the dispensaries on that day for its recreational sales, and first thing in the morning, and there was a line out there that went for like 3 hours, I think.
Seriously.
People had camped overnight to be able to be there.
And they were pretty responsible for the most part.
Yes.
I mean, every line I saw, people weren't lighting up in the streets or on the sidewalks. They were just freezing.
Well, they hadn't bought it yet.
Well, I'm sure they had some on them still. But
good point. But afterwards, I didn't see any fighting or anything either.
Yeah. It's not necessarily the drug that drives people to fisticuffs. So the consumers have been responsible. What about the governments? What about the industry? If you were going to give all three of these groups one grade in terms of how these legal sales have gone, what would that be?
I do think that the governments can get a fairly good grade too. I think that they've had a difficult time kind of piecing together everything. That said, I also do think that it would really be beneficial if everyone involved would look at the spirit of Amendment 64. It says right in the first, I think it's the third line, it says that the intention of this amendment is to regulate marijuana like alcohol. And to me, that's a pretty clear directive. I mean, I keep seeing a lot of people saying, oh, this has never been done before, and we have to come up with a completely new system to regulate it. And it's kind of like, well, why don't we just take the alcohol system and then apply it as much as we can to cannabis? And then if there's a place where cannabis really doesn't fit, like maybe let's say weights, okay, weights are going to be different. Well, just put a different weight on it. It's not really that complicated. And then I hear complaints about, well, it's illegal federally. Well, the thing is, we're already moving ahead of the federal government in that area anyway, so we might as well regulate it sensibly, like I believe alcohol has been regulated for quite some time. Those laws have been really worked out over decades since alcohol was allowed to be legal again.
Sure.
And
some would argue that alcohol is perhaps too relaxed. The regulations surrounding the alcohol, the prices surrounding alcohol and taxes are maybe a bit too much relaxed. Some would argue.
I certainly hear that too from people, but why don't they work then on regulating alcohol in the ways that they want to have it regulated?
Sure.
I see a lot of people saying, well, we can't regulate marijuana as loosely as alcohol because alcohol has got all these problems, and it's like, well, I don't see those same people working on tightening up those alcohol regulations.
Right.
Usually quite the opposite, actually. They're usually doing anything that they can to further the alcohol industry, which, I mean, I consume alcohol. I really like alcohol. I mean, I'm not like a boozer, but I'm an occasional casual drinker, and I have nothing against the alcohol industry.
Yeah, we're not here to demonize any drug.
Yeah, no.
Just have realistic talk.
So yeah, but I just think that Amendment 64, the spirit of it and the letter of it was to regulate marijuana like alcohol, and that's not been done by most of the authorities.
Okay, so the authorities, the governments maybe aren't getting the best grade, but what happens when you wrap industry into there? What does that final grade end up being for 2 years of sales?
I'm really disappointed in the industry, actually, but it depends on who you're talking about. I think that one thing is that there have been efforts to continue to implement Amendment 64 and to really have Colorado be proud of its cannabis, which it's been known for ever since I was a little kid in the 1970s. And so, it's, and probably well before that. I mean, the first person arrested for marijuana possession was a Coloradan, actually two Coloradans together. And
one of whom had the last name Baca.
Yeah.
Let's throw it out there.
Yeah. There you go.
Maybe a long-lost relative of mine.
Are you related?
I don't know. I've always wanted to go find them. I need to find the family. And if the family, if we are somehow related, then there's a book there, and it will happen.
Yeah. Their graves are here in Colorado, so I really want to go visit their graves sometime.
Oh yeah.
We should make a ceremony or something.
Let's do it. Vince will make a video. It'll be fun.
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah, and so the industry has not really been as supportive of that as I think that they should be. Like, there are parts of the industry who are, and they show up and they contribute to the policy making groups who are really trying to help make things better and push it forward. And when I say better, I mean more well regulated. Mm-hmm. And it's clear that it can be more well regulated than the way it is now. I mean, you look at the energy consumption caused by the regulation, if you look at the zoning issues caused by the regulation, and where the shops are placed, where the grows are placed, where there's pressure on economic pressure in different ways, that's all coming from the regulations.
Sure.
Because if we had cannabis regulated like alcohol in the state, it just wouldn't be, there wouldn't be that much pressure like that in any particular area. Just like there's not a lot of pressure around alcohol in that way.
Yeah, well, we have a national distribution system for alcohol, I guess, and we don't have that for marijuana at this time.
That's true, but we have a lot of alcohol sales in Colorado.
Yeah.
And production, both, which is great. Like I say, I'm proud of that. I think it's great. But why don't we use that model for cannabis as well?
Sure. All right, final chance. Here is the grade. Jordan Dietrich's grade for the first 2 years of sales. What is that grade?
I think a B+, given the fact that we've been the leaders in this area.
All right, I appreciate that. Talked it out, came to that.
What did you vote?
I didn't get. I dodged.
Oh.
I'm a lobbyist, man. I'm very good.
You are.
Jordan, you mentioned that there are things that you wish were different. So let's pick one of those things. One thing about Colorado marijuana you would like to see change 2016.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are a list. I could go beyond my fingers, but
Sure you could.
the one that really stands out to me is social consumption. It's criminal in my mind that we have people coming from all over the world to visit here who are enjoying purchasing in one of our shops, bringing in jobs, money to our state, bringing in tax money, and then they have to illegally try to find a place in public to consume the product that they've traveled all the way here to enjoy purchasing, right, and I assume enjoy consuming, and then they end up in some back alley with guys who are like all stinky asking them for money, and kind of following them around, asking them where they're from and stuff. I've seen it.
Sure. Well, I think we all have. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's, on top of that, there's like thousands of arrests, or well, no, not arrests, tickets for public consumption being given out in Denver every year still. And that, like, why are we doing that? Why don't we allow some social clubs, some places where people can go, like they have coffee shops in Amsterdam, or like we have alcohol bars and
sure,
establishments, clubs that people can go to consume alcohol, and there are smoking lounges. So why is that not allowed in Colorado?
It's amazing how many people answer that question with that one piece, whether we're talking about 2014 or 2016, and here we are having the same conversation. Shawn Coleman, I just saw you in the basement of the state capitol a couple months ago at a meeting about this very issue that they are talking about.
So I think there's a couple of components here. The first is going to be the component for the non-cannabis consumer. Because what happens when you don't have a place that is the place for people to go consume cannabis, what happens is they consume it instead everywhere. So if I was a person who wanted, my absolutely guaranteed to be cannabis-free environments back, I'd be the first one supporting legislation to enact these things, because otherwise, that situation now we have in Colorado where it's like, well, you go in someone's hotel room and they're consuming cannabis in there. If you go into the bathroom of a restaurant, someone's consuming cannabis in there. That's going to continue until there's a place to go do it, right?
I've seen those things too.
Yeah. So that's one piece. I think there's another piece that's very important that doesn't get talked about quite as much. And I'm getting to your basement in the Capitol thing in a second, so where I'm getting there. But
yeah, no.
Which is for patients, right? So, for example, I have this vaporizer. I could turn it on. It takes 5 seconds to turn it on, and I could consume that, right? So let's say I'm a patient and I've got some acute illness that has a fast onset epilepsy, something like that. Well, if I need my emergency rescue medicine, well, should I do it here in the street? Or am I going to go into this facility and get arrested? And if I go into, and let's say it's a supermarket, right? But let's say it's a cannabis club. Well, if it's 21 and above, what if I'm an epilepsy patient and I'm 16? Mm-hmm. How am I, so now I still have to stay out here in the street and take my medicine? So I think one of the things that you're going to see at the state legislature, in addition to legislation about cannabis hospitality, is also about cannabis patients' rights. I mean, the reality is this is medicine. And if you are a person who needs to take your medicine so that you don't have this acute, potentially life-threatening episode, well, I mean, you're not going to stop them from taking the asthma inhaler. So why can't I use my vaporizer if that's going to prevent me from having this potentially not just a threat to me, but a threat to everybody else that's there medical episode, right?
And what's encouraging is it's not just activists or lobbyists or even journalists who are saying, this seems wrong, there's a flaw here. We're starting to see state legislators take note, right?
Well, because it becomes to an issue of discriminating against different types of patients. I mean, why can I take my asthma rescue inhaler here, but I can't use my cannabis emergency rescue vaporizer here? You know, it's the same level of urgency to the patient, right? So, going to your question about the sneaky meeting in the basement at the Capitol.
Not so sneaky.
No, it wasn't so sneaky. No, these meetings are always publicly noticed, and there are a lot of people at them. So we're going to see some level of discussion about this at the state capitol. What the specifics are going to be are yet to be determined. The session doesn't start until, well, I guess if you're listening to this podcast a few days ago, but tomorrow when we're talking about it right now. And, you know, again, for one of the things we're going to have to talk about, again, is in the concept of for patients' rights, because the hospitality facilities are clearly going to be 21 and above, because that's what the Constitution says. There's nothing to do about that. So whether it becomes the idea that basically a recreational marijuana dispensary, you could have some sort of off-site tasting room where, you know, I can go in and, you know, sample their products. You know, there's a dab bar there. You know, you can sample some flower in small quantities, and then from there, you can mill around, you can socialize, you can gather, you can congregate. One of the things I think is really important for the hospitality industry to remember about this is that if you have a 43.4 marijuana license, you cannot have a liquor license, and you cannot have a food service license. So this idea of the cold mingling things, that's impossible.
And a little background on what Shawn's talking about is when this social use, public consumption conversation really got going, the hospitality industry in particular did rise up in Denver and throughout Colorado and kind of voice their concerns and basically say that they were not for such a system.
Right.
But Jordan, I mean, if this is the direction we're moving, maybe cannabis-only clubs without alcohol, without food, is that something that you think is a step forward in the right direction? Is that where you'd like to see this land?
It's really interesting to me about the hospitality industry because I used to work in the hospitality industry, and
as did most of us, right?
Yeah, and the hospitality industry in Denver is mostly owned by just a couple of people, and they are extremely anti-Amendment 64, and they're the kind of people who came out alarming us that we were all going to lose our jobs and all the tourists would quit coming to Denver if we legalized marijuana, and you know, they were clearly wrong. I mean, I knew they were wrong at the time, but we hadn't proven it yet. But, you know, we've proven it now.
Well, you know, I would say if I was in the hospitality industry where I'm concerned about my DRAM insurance, my liquor license, where my customers are coming into my facility always smoking weed in the bathroom anyway, I couldn't wait for this tasting room license bill to come out. So that way those consumers can go to those facilities, consume cannabis with their friends socially in that environment, and then when they're done, come to my bar. Don't risk because I mean, I think what people need to understand about it's, you know, you're talking about your neighborhood bar, which you already like going to. If you get busted smoking weed in their bar, they lose their license.
Sure.
So they should be concerned about it. So what we need to do is create a place where people can go where that's what's going on there. And so I think it behooves the hospitality industry in the state to support this type of legislation.
Well, I mean, I just interviewed our friend Kendall Norris this week for a big Q&A. It's live on the Cannabist homepage right now. She throws these amazing, legendary, you know, kind of extravagant dinner parties that are paired with cannabis, and also yoga outings that are also paired with cannabis. And she basically said, these people are getting high in your bathroom, in their car, before they're going in to eat, before they're going to do yoga. She just wants to make it legal and make it communal and understood. So you guys, it is time for the pot quiz, and we are jumping into it.
Pot quiz.
There will be a quiz. There is always a quiz. Shawn, we're starting with you.
Oh, good.
Jordan, if he gets the answer wrong, you can steal it, and vice versa. So Shawn, we're going to test your history here a little bit, okay? So, Paul McCartney was arrested and spent 9 days in jail in 1980 for possessing about a half pound of cannabis. In what country?
Paul McCartney, the Beatle. I'm going to call the Juilliard card on this. Why would I know about anything that happened in music prior to the year 1897? 1968.
But you've heard of Paul McCartney, right?
Sure. Wait,
Sure.
did he do something with Telemon?
I'm not going to give you any
1968? I'm going to guess 1968.
1968 is not right. But, solid guess. Jordan? Also, the question is not the year, because it's 1980. The question is what country?
country. Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate that. I'll remember that.
You can give it another.
I appreciate
No!
it. I appreciate it.
You got it wrong. I'm
I
taking
did
the
say
question.
1968. All right, Jordan, what country?
Canada.
Canada is your guess. Also wrong. Not as wrong as 1968, mind you. But good props to you both.
The unincorporated 1968.
The country is Japan.
Okay.
Jordan, this is your question. All right, you ready? This is also a little bit of history. We tried to pair these.
That was
pair these
geography, not
questions.
history.
Name the Academy Award-winning writer and director who served in the U.S. Army in the late 60s and was almost arrested for federal pot smuggling when he returned home from Vietnam. Note, the charge came less than a decade before his breakthrough film, Midnight Express. Academy Award-winning writer-director.
I have no idea.
Not a guess?
Man, I was
I'm
hoping
gonna
you
give you
knew
that
that, man.
No.
You were supposed to bail
I
me
don't
out
know.
by just coming with the answer.
No, I really don't know.
No idea. All right, throw into Shawn.
So once again, we have to talk about how much of a nerd I am that I know nothing about the world unless it involved Mozart, Bach, or Beethoven. Thank you.
You're pop culturally
Or we.
illiterate. That's it.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's cool.
exactly right.
Wow. Okay, so no guess
I
from
think I'm
Shawn
gonna
either.
try.
He was pop culturally literate in 1868.
That's right. Yeah, 1868 is way too late for me. I gotta be like, you gotta.
This is too modern that you're
1812 is
talking
about
I know.
my cutoff.
Yeah, this is 1969 is way too much.
Yeah.
So the Academy Award-winning writer-director is Oliver Stone.
Oh, wow.
Midnight
Oliver
Express.
Stone.
Oliver Stone, wow.
I have Stoner. Oliver Stoner. Apparently that's right.
That's
Shawn,
probably
this
true.
is your question.
Right. Do you want me to get it right?
Not pop culture. This one's about pesticides.
Okay.
So, imidacloprid is one of traditional agriculture's most common pesticides. And while it's banned for use on cannabis, pot growers have favored its use because of its effectiveness. But now the EPA is saying the pesticide chemical imidacloprid is killing
Our
what
pollinators.
essential insect?
Our pollinators, our bees.
Ah, the
Gotta have the
bees.
bees.
That's a ding.
Very good.
Correct answer.
Right.
All right, cool. Here we go.
We have one.
Jordan, final question of the night. What late night TV host posted a video of himself teaching a member of his staff to drive? A video that ultimately ends up with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart hotboxing the car after a trip to the local dispensary.
Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart. No.
Oh.
Good guess, though. Shawn,
I was,
for
yeah,
the
and I
points.
just read it too. And it was in the intro and everything. I just forget it wasn't Conan, was it?
Conan!
Yeah, I mean, it was totally Conan. I totally knew that was
Another one.
Conan the entire time.
Well done. All right,
Very good, very
Jordan. We'll have you back on again. You can
I hope
you can
so.
defend, and
That'd be
Shawn, you
great.
can defend your title. I do want to say thanks to our guests, Shawn Coleman and Jordan Dietrich, and thanks to you all for watching and listening. I'm Ricardo Baca, joined by producers Vince, Dane, Eric, and the rest of the crew. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you next week.
To lose, I choose to win, I'm all in, I'm calling any posse you'll be raising at the end, I say it again, ain't afraid to get in, I be going for the jackpot with aces in my hand, I'm raw.